One of the things I think that keeps us from getting access to medieval wisdom is the caricatures that we still have in our culture about what the period of the Middle Ages was about and what it was to be a Christian in those times. Just very basically, there's the myth of sort of medieval stupidity, that throughout that period from 500 AD to 1500 AD, people thought the world was flat. You can think of Monty Python type caricatures. They were easily gullible, et cetera, et cetera. There's very little of truth in those caricatures. There was certainly a period early in the Middle Ages, between about 500 and 800 AD, when some of the classical understandings of the material world, for instance, were lost, a bit of a dark ages. But even in that period, medievals knew perfectly well that the world was round, and most of them could tell you even the approximate circumference. These were just everyday kinds of knowledge. The caricature derived from an Enlightenment program to dismiss the church, and by association, the earlier periods of the church, like the Middle Ages. Another area of caricature that we encounter is that monks were completely unengaged culturally. They crawled away in their little cloisters and never did anything for anyone. This is also patently untrue. I extensively talk about the history of the hospital, which was a Christian created enterprise. And this really for at least 500 years happened within the monastery as a service to the surrounding society. I could give you many other examples. Much of the product of the work of the monks' hands was sold or given to the surrounding communities. They had many social functions, not least of which was to pray for other folks in their society. And finally, there's the misunderstanding, really in Protestant circles mostly, that medieval Christianity was all about works righteousness, that it was about working your way to heaven, and there was no understanding of grace. Well, that also is really untrue, although there were some questionable teachings in Luther's time. By the end of the medieval period, there were a few who were really teaching a kind of works righteousness. But throughout the medieval period, Augustine of Hippo is the premier theologian, and everyone understood his primary teaching of grace, that salvation comes to us not by our works, but by divine and irresistible grace. I would hope that those who would be prevented from digging into the medieval period to see if there's really value and wisdom there by these kinds of caricatures of medieval stupidity or of works righteousness or what have you, would give it a chance and would recognize that we have very imperfect ways of understanding past periods. There are all kinds of stories being told about any period and about any group of people that are caricatures, and it's always valuable to get beyond those and to understand the real wisdom, the real integrity, as well as the warts and the faults of these periods.